Okay, so last time we talked about this part here, the cochlea, and how it affects hearing. Well, if you look into the ear, you can see here the eardrum and here the cochlea. Well, beside it is this convoluted shape thing called a labyrinth, and it's a whole bunch of tunnels inside your skull, so burrowed into your skull, and that provides you with a sense of balance. Now, inside these tunnels, there's a membrane, and on the outside of the membrane, so between the bone and the membrane, is a fluid called the perilymph, which is sort of like extracellular fluid. Now, inside the perilymph, or inside the membrane, so throughout your vestibular system, you find something called endolymph, which is what bathes the hair cells, and it's high in potassium and low in sodium, and it also has a high positive voltage with respect to the outside here, the perilymph. Now, the reason the auditory system and the vestibular system is close together is because they have a common evolution. On the side of fish, you have this lateral line system, lateral line organ, and it's a series of tubes. And inside the tubes, again, you find the hair cells that you find in your own ears. And these hair cells are connected to neurons, and they transmit stuff from the outside water. They do two things. The waves are produced by noises in the water. Let's say another fish swimming, and that's a sort of precursor of our auditory system. And then also it's activated by whenever this fish itself swims, moves, and that activates those hair cells, bends those hair cells. And so that this common system evolved into something different for humans, one part being vestibular, the other part being hearing. Now, within the vestibular system, there's two parts. One is called the otolith, this thing here, and the outside here is called the canals, and each has a different function. Now, the otoliths serve, again, two functions. One is translating. This figure here is showing translation, so moving in a straight line, either forward, backwards, or up and down. And the other is gravity. So that's illustrated by this figure. So this person's head is upside down, but it's turned this way. And the person knows which way is down, so they can manage to balance themselves on their arms instead of their legs. Now, inside the otoliths, you've got two sacs, like eggs. One's called the utricle, and the other is called the saccule. And within this sac, on the inside of this sac, you've got a widening. It's thicker in these points. That's called the macula. And on those maculae, you have hair cells growing into the sac, into the inside of the sac. And there's thousands of these hair cells pointing to all kinds of directions. And like in hearing, they're connected to the eighth nerve. Now, if you look at the hair cell, unlike the one for hearing, this hair cell is embedded in a gel. It's like a jello. And on top of the jello, you have the sprinkling of stones. And those stones are made to add mass to this jello. And the hair cell has a particular shape. It has a long hair and then shorter and shorter hairs, like the ones you find in hearing. And like in hearing, there are little strings attached to each hair which open up a flap and allow potassium to come in. And maybe allowing the potassium to come in is not quite right. It's actually being forced to come in by this high positive potential. So the inside of the cell has got a very low potential, and the outside has in this high plus 80 volt potential. So it pushes the potassium into the cell whenever the flap opens. Now, these hair cells get activated whenever you move backwards or forward. So when the hair cell bends in this direction, you've got a high frequency of activation. When the hair cell bends in that direction, everything closes, and you've got a low frequency of activation in this eighth nerve. The other important thing is that if you watch this action potentials here, they never go silent. They go almost silent, but even when the head is moving, there is continuous action potentials coming from this hair cell. So you're just increasing and decreasing the number of action potentials per second. The other way this is activated is by gravity. So we said either translation, moving forward, backwards, or up and down, but also when you bend your head to different positions, you can still sense which way down is, and it opens and closes those little flaps. Now, these hair cells, if you look at them in more detail, if you look, imagine this is the top of a hair cell, and there's the condylocium, this long, big, thick, long fiber. This arrow then represents the direction of the condylocium. So you can see that these arrows here are pointing in all kinds of directions, both in the utricle and the saccule. And if you look at this as a three-dimensional cube, the utricle lies in the horizontal plane, so something like the plane of your table in front of you. Okay, and so it's sensitive to movements to the left, to the right, forward, and backwards. That'll bend those hair cells, or at least one of those hair cells. It's aligned in the correct direction. The saccule, on the other hand, is perpendicular to that. So it's like you take the armrest that you have and flip it up. That's the plane that the saccule would be on. And so it's sensitive to movements, both forward and backwards, but also up and down. So at least one hair cell or one group of hair cells will get activated by some particular motion of your head. And the brain figures out by which one is most active as to what direction you're going in. Okay. Now, when you turn, that is rotate, it's these canals that get activated. Okay? And you've got here the horizontal canal, which is again in the horizontal plane, the plane of your table, and then two other canals perpendicular to that. One is called the anterior canal, and one is called the posterior canal. Now, if we look inside, again, we've got fluid inside each of these canals, and this fluid pushes on this diaphragm here, inside this widening. This is an ampulla, so there's a widening here, and this diaphragm, called the cupula, blocks this widening, and so the fluid has to push on this cupula, and in doing so, it bends again hairs that projecting into the cupula. So you can see here that as you turn, you bend the hair cells, and in case of the horizontal canal, if you turn in one direction, you increase the firing rate. If you turn in the opposite direction, you decrease the firing rate. Now, you can see here, I'm going to turn this guy to the left. I have to take its mirror image. I think it's turning to the left, yeah. So you're turning towards, in the direction of the horizontal canal. So if I turn my head left, I increase the firing rate of hair cells in that canal. If I turn my head right, I increase the firing rate of the hair cells in that horizontal canal. Now, the other two canals do something different. So if I turn my head in the plane of this canal, I'll turn my head sort of in this plane. So you can see it's not nose down, it's not towards the right ear, it's somewhere in between the two. So a combination of turning towards the nose and towards the left ear, I should say. Imagine it's a bit towards your eye, or left eye. Now that causes this canal to increase its firing rate. Okay. In contrast, if you turn your head in this direction, which is towards the posterior canal on the opposite side, you increase its firing rate and you decrease this anterior canal's firing rate. So this canal and this canal are sort of tied together. They're in the same plane. Okay? When one goes up, the other goes down. Similarly, the posterior canal here is acting as a pair to this anterior canal here on this side. So you can see here that we've got sort of three canal pairs, the horizontal and two of the anterior posterior canals being paired together. And when one increases its firing rate, the opposite in the pair decreases its firing rate. Now, the other thing to note is that it's only the canals that are in the plane of the canal that get activated, the biggest activity. The other canals, if you're turning like your head in one of the canals per plane, the others are silent. So if you turn your head horizontally, the vertical canals are both silent. All four vertical canals are silent. When you turn your head in the plane of, let's say, the anterior on the left and the posterior on the right, only those two canals are being, canal pairs are being activated, either increasing or decreasing. The other four canals are also silent. Now, what happens when you turn your head like that? Well, it drives a lot of reflexes. So so you can maintain for example, stability, that it drives reflexes to your leg muscles, and that keeps you upright. If you fall forward, you can catch yourself with your arms. But one of the main reflexes that it drives is something called the vestibular-ocular reflex, or VOR for short. And you can see here, as the head turns, where the eye is pointing isn't changing if the canal is working right. Okay? So when you turn your head, if you're looking at something, that stays stable on the back of the eye. And the ideal ratio of how much the head is turning to how much the eye is turning is -1. So if the head turns to the right, the eye has to turn equally to the left. And if it does so, the two movements cancel, and the eye is stable in space. And the whole point of that is then to have no retinal slip, that is, a crisp, stationary image on the back of the eye. And if you've taken any photography, you know that to get the best shot, you have to keep your camera still. Well, the eye is acting like a camera. If it's still, you'll see everything nice and clear. Okay, the canal that activates this is nice and short. You start off with the hair cell itself. That then goes to the 8th nerve. That then goes to the vestibular nucleus, which then crosses over to the opposite side of the brain, activating motor neurons here. These motor neurons in turn contract these two muscles, this one on this side and this one through another neuron on this side. Okay, so again, when you've got a simple reflex. So if your head turns, you increase the firing rate of the hair cells here, and they in turn increase the firing rate of everything along this pathway, causing this thing here, which we now label as the lateral rectus and the medial rectus on this side, to contract. Okay, when it does so, the eye turns in the opposite direction. So here the head is turning in this direction, that is to the right. Here the eye then turns to the left. Now, as it does so, the canal on the opposite side, the left side here, is decreasing its firing rate. Okay. This is increasing, this is decreasing. So then less activity is coming along these pathways, and this medial rectus is relaxing, and this lateral rectus on this side is relaxing. So it doesn't impede the contraction of the opposite two muscles. Now, so if everything's working and your head rotates, your eye gets turned in the opposite direction, and if you look out at the eye, you see this, a nice stable view of the world. That is, no retinal slip. Now, if it does move, you generate something called the optokinetic reflex, and that's used to assist the VOR. Now look at that for a moment. And to demonstrate how that happens, I'd like all of you to stand up, okay? And put your laptops down so that you don't fall down. Okay, That wasn't a laptop. That's good. If you could first just keep your eyes open and stand on one leg. Okay, starting now. And if you fall, then okay. Everyone's doing fine. Okay, you can relax. Okay. Now do the same. I'll say when. Do the same with your eyes closed. So I'll just go to a new page. Okay. Starting now. Oh, not so easy. Okay. So, okay, you can sit down. So that shows you that the optokinetic system, the thing coming from your eyes, helps you maintain your balance. Your vestibular system is doing a lot, but the thing that's coming in from your eyes is helping you. Now, I won't try this, but you can also, because the screen isn't big enough, but if the screen, sort of took up the whole backspace, or you stood right in front of it, you would, even with your eyes open, be unstable, because here your visual system is telling you that you're moving when you're not moving. Okay. So you got a visual illusion of motion. So let's look at this. We'll do, okay. Anyone who thinks that the vestibular system contributes to your sense of balance, put up your hands. Okay. Anyone who thinks touch, your sense of proprioception, touch has a sense. Okay, yes? Yeah, it does. So for example, if the soles of your foot, the pressure on them will help you maintain balance. Does proprioception help you maintain balance? Yes. Again, because as you lean forward, the muscles at the back of your leg, your quadriceps will be stretched, and you'll sense that stretch will elicit those reflexes that we talked about a week ago or so, and that will cause the muscle to contract, and you'll restore your balance. Okay. Vision. We saw that vision helps as well, and in some cases, the auditory system. If there's something that's a cue of a stationary object, you might use that as a cue to maintain your balance. So, now, what happens when you feel sort of unstable? Well, one primary reason for that is that this thing called a cupula, it gets bent when you start rotating. But if you stay rotating, you'll come back to its vertical position. So if you start rotating, it'll deflect. And then if you maintain that same rotation for a long time, your hair cells will come back to the vertical position. So that they won't stop firing, but they'll come to the resting state. And you'll sense, or your vestibular system will tell you that you're not turning, that you're stationary. Now, if, for example, you opened your eyes, you're rotating, and then you opened your eyes, you would initially see this. You open your eyes, and the vestibular system tells you you're not turning, and you see that you are. Now, gradually, the optic nerve system will kick in, and it'll stabilize the image again. But initially, you see the world moving, and you feel dizzy. You sometimes feel that when you're standing in the subway and the train on the beside you starts to move, and you feel that you're moving. Or if you're sitting in a car and sitting in a car behind another car or a big truck, and it starts moving, you feel like your car is moving backwards. So the vestibular system helps the optic the optokinetic system helps the vestibular system. So it stabilizes the image, but it doesn't do it quickly. It takes it some time to stabilize the image. Now, normally the two act together. So as you start to turn, it's the vestibular system kicks in right away, but it gradually becomes less and less as the cupula becomes vertical again. It senses less and less motion. But that's good because at that point the visual system will kick in, and it'll keep your sense of motion. So if you were to turn with your eyes open, you can prevent that sense of dizziness that you get. The main way of getting dizzy is to turn round and round and round with your eyes closed and then open them. Or worse still, come to a sudden stop, and that'll cause the cupula to swing in the opposite direction, telling your brain you're actually rotating in the opposite direction, and then you open it, and then you sense, of course, again the same thing, the sense of motion. Now, this ballet dancer is trying to avoid becoming dizzy. Now, how is this ballet dancer doing? Okay, again, raise your hands if you think it's by suppressing signals coming from the inner ear or the vestibular system. No hands raised. That's good. We'll turn that down. Okay. Providing a fixed focus for the eyes. You notice that, okay, about half the class thinks this is the right answer. Or third, preventing the head from turning continuously. The other half of the class. So let's see what the answer is. It's the third one. Okay. You can see I've slowed it down here. And what she's doing is she's looking forward for the longest time. Then when she can't look forward anymore, she snaps her head right around and looks forward again. And what that does is prevent the head from turning continuously for a long time. Now, the reason she keeps that head forward is that she has fixated on something in front of her, but she's using that as a cue to get your head to a new position. Okay. Oh, this lecture is going to be finished soon. Why do we get dizzy? Well, imagine yourself on this boat going up and down, and that's you inside your cabin. And you're not looking at the window, but you're looking at the wall of the cabin. And so your vestibular system is telling you that you're moving up and down. And it's your otoliths that are telling you that. Okay, but your visual system tells you that you're stationary. There's no retinal slip caused by you're moving up and down because you're staring at the wall that's moving with you. So when those two signals are acting in opposites, it's what causes it's a conflict between those two signals that gives you the sense of motion sickness. Now, the best cure for that when you're on a boat is to go outside and look at the horizon, because that's going to be moving the same way that you're moving, and both the visual system and the vestibular system will be congruent. Now, often the sense of getting motion sickness is associated with a feeling of nausea. And again, the brain interprets these signals being in conflict. So one signal telling you one thing and the other signal telling you another, as something wrong with the brain itself. And its response is that it's been poisoned, and the best way to avoid that is to elicit vomiting to clear this poison. Okay. Now, throughout life, this is the reflex that ideally will prevent a retinal slip, and it has a gain of -1 ideally, but it changes. Your muscles get older. You might have a few neurons drop out here or here. So what will readjust the gain? Well, and also when you have new prescription lenses, if the lenses on your eye act as a sort of magnifier, they make things up close or more far away, and as a consequence, you have to readjust how much the eye turns. Now, normally, when the reflex is working, when you're moving up and down, the vestibular system will stabilize things. If it isn't working, every time you jump up and down, this is what you'll see. So this makes it reading the sign difficult. Now, if the thing is working properly, it'll get readjusted, and it'll get readjusted in hours or a day or two, and gradually the reflex will come back to normal. Now, what tunes it is this another pathway through a structure called the cerebellum, which is just below the cortex at the back of the head. Okay, and that structure provides another pathway in addition to the VOR. So you have a direct pathway and then an indirect pathway through the cerebellum, and goes through these mossy fibers, connects onto these parallel cells, fibers which then connect onto the fibers of these Purkinje cells, which in turn inhibit the vestibular nucleus. And this is the pathway that provides corrections to the VOR. Now, how does it do it? Okay, so the cerebellum's task is, whenever something goes wrong, to readjust it. So you can see here, something is wrong, and when something is wrong, of course, there'll be images slipping on this retina, and any image slipping on this retina elicits the firing of this structure here, which elicits the activity of climbing fibers, which act like a vine encircling the branches of this Purkinje cell. And when the activity of the parallel fiber coincides with this error, the synapse here is changed. So it doesn't change every synapse of these many, many parallel fibers, just the one that coincides with the retinal slip. So you can see that it goes through these steps. First of all, something goes wrong. You then then generates retinal slip. That then activates this coincidental firing of this, and that again changes the synapse there. That fixes the VOR, and the retinal slip stops. So it's a nice sort of feedback loop. Whenever an error appears, it gets cured. So the cerebellum here acts like a repair shop in this case for the VOR. But it also acts as a repair shop for almost every reflex that you have. Your reflex of your leg muscles that keep you standing, or maintain your balance while you're skiing, or riding a bicycle, or more complex reflexes like throwing a ball. And that's it.